Chapter 11, Lesson 3, Measures of Variation. You will be able to find the measures of variation. Measures of variation are used to describe the distribution or spread of the data. They describe how the values of a data set vary with a single number. A quartile is one measure of variation. So the first thing to do is to order your data from least to greatest, putting all numbers in there. We then find the median, which we've done before, and then we are going to add to our knowledge by finding the first quartile and the third quartile of the data. So we order the data, we split it in half, and we split each of these sections in half as well. Those will tell us our quartiles. Quartiles are values that divide the set of data into 4 equal parts. So I have 4 numbers, 4 numbers, 4 numbers, 4 numbers. The first and third quartiles are the medians of the data values less than the median and the data values greater than the median, respectively. The interquartile range, which we abbreviate as IQR, is the distance between the first quartile and the third quartile. And the range is the difference between the greatest value and the least value. 1/4 of the data lie below the first quartile, and 1/4 of the data lie above the third quartile. So 1/2 of the data lie between the first and third quartiles. So let's take a look at a problem here. Find the measures of variation for the data. The first thing you're going to do is to order your data from least to greatest. So let's go ahead and do that. We have 1, 8, 25, 30, 50, and 70. And it looks like this data has to do with animals and the speed that they can run, or walk for that matter. So the first thing we're going to do, I'm going to go ahead and put lines above and below my data, and I'm going to introduce here a minimum value and a maximum value. So your minimum value is 1 and your maximum value is 70. That's going to help us find the range. We're then going to find the middle of the data. So let's start on the outside and work our way in. That's 1 number, 2 number, 3 number. The median is in between 25 and 30. The way we find it is we take 25 plus 30, divide by 2. When we do that, we get 55 divided by 2, or simply 27.5. Now we have this section over here, and we have this section over here. We're going to find the middle of each of those sections. Well, the middle of this section is right here at 8, and the middle of this section is right here at 50. So now we have found 5 numbers, and that's all we need to figure out our measures of variation. So let's go ahead and label these. I know this middle line was the median, and all that's left is your quartile 1, which is just Q with a smaller 1 next to it, and quartile 3. Now, it's quartile 3 because the median is technically quartile 2, and our maximum is technically quartile 4. There are 4 quartiles. But since we have other names such as median and maximum, we don't necessarily use quartile 2 and quartile 4 as names. Alright, so we have 5 numbers here. We call that our 5-number summary. Now let's find the measures of variation. The measures of variation, we have our range, we have our interquartile range, our median, our quartile 1, and our quartile 3. Let's fill in what we know here. We know the quartile 3 is 50. We know that quartile 1 is 8. And we know that the median is 27.5. To find the range, we are going to take the largest value and subtract the smallest value. So 70 minus 1 gives us 69. 69 is the range. The inner quartile range, it takes your two inside quartiles and finds the range of those two numbers. Or in other words, it takes your quartile 1 and quartile 3 and subtracts those numbers. So 50 minus 8 is 42. So the inner quartile range is 42. And this list here shows our measures of variation. Letter B, determine the measures of variation for the data 64, 61, 67, 59, 60, 58, 57, 71, 56, and 62. So let's go ahead, we'll order it least to greatest again to start us off. So 56, 57, 58, and I like to cross them off as I go. 59, 60, and 61. 62, 64, 67, and 71. Okay. First thing we're going to do is to mark our minimum and maximum value that will help us find the range. 56 and 71. And this again is the minimum and maximum. Let's find our middle value. Looks like our median is in between 60 and 61. So let's go ahead and add those two numbers together and divide by 2. When we do that, we get 60.5. Now let's find the middle of this lower half. Looks like it's right here at 58. And find the middle of our upper half between the median and the maximum. And it's here at 64. And these are your quartiles, quartile 1 and quartile 3. And we have our 5-number summary. We need the range, the interquartile range, our quartile 1, our median, and our quartile 3. Let's write down what we know. Our quartile 3 is 64. The median is 60.5. Quartile 1 is 58. To find the interquartile range, we are going to subtract our two quartiles, 64 minus 58. When we subtract those, we get 6 as our interquartile range. And to get our regular range, we subtract our maximum minus our minimum, 71 minus 56, which is 15. And those are our measures of variation. An outlier is a data value that is either much greater or much less than the median. If a data value is more than 1.5 times the value of the inner quartile range beyond the quartiles, it is an outlier. So here's our key amount here, 1.5 times. So what we're going to do, and it's multiplied by the inner quartile range, what we're going to do is find the inner quartile range only and multiply it by 1.5 to help us find our range in which our number should be in. If there are numbers outside of that range, then those are considered outliers. So the ages of candidates in an election are 23, 48, 49, 55, 57, 63, and 72. Name any outliers. Okay, so the first thing is to order them from least to greatest. We have 23, 48, 49, 55, 57, 63, and 72. And let's just double check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Let's do our minimum and maximum, which is 23 and 72. Even though we don't need all of these numbers, it's great practice to help identify parts of the data. Let's find our middle value, our median, which is 55. And now what we really need are the quartile 1 and quartile 3. So 48 would be the middle of this half. We don't include 55 because it's already being used. This line is straight through that number. So we only have 3 numbers on this side, 48 being in the middle. So this is our quartile 1. Same thing over here, 55 doesn't count. We have 57, 63, and 72. Our middle value, or quartile 3, is 63. To find our inner quartile range, we subtract our 2 quartile numbers. So 63 minus 48, and we get 15. So we get an inner quartile range equals 15. So now what we're going to do to find out if there are any outliers. We are going to take that 15 inner quartile range and multiply it by our important number of 1.5. When we multiply that, we get a value of 22.5. That number right here, this 22.5, is going to tell us what we need to add and subtract from our first and third quartiles. So let's take our first quartile. So we take quartile 1, which is 48. Let's go ahead and subtract 48 minus 22.5. And when we subtract them, we get 25.5. And let's take our quartile 3. Which is 63. And this time let's add it. It's the upper range. We want to add it to 22.5. And we get 85.5. So this right here represents our range. 25.5 all the way to 85.5. If any numbers are outside of that, those would be considered outliers. So let's look at our data again. We have 72. 72 is in between there, so it's not an outlier. 63 is in between, as well as these numbers. However, 23 is not greater than 25.5. 23 does not end up in this range. So from that, we can say that 23 is an outlier, meaning it's really outside the data. Let's do another one. The lengths and feet of various bridges are 88, 251, 275, 354, and 1,121. Name any outliers in the data set. Let's order it from least to greatest, which it actually looks like it already ordered from least to greatest, so we'll just repeat that. 88, 251, 275, 354, and 1,121. Here's the minimum and maximum, 88 and 1,121. The middle, or median, is 275. Quartile 1, I already am using 275 for the median, so I only have two numbers on the left to deal with, which means our quartile 1 will be in between. So 88 plus 251, divide by 2, and we get 169.5. On the right-hand side, again, we don't use 275. We only have two numbers, so put the line in between the two numbers. And this is 354 plus 1,121 divided by 2. And that gives us 737.5. So we're actually going to have a pretty big interquartile range. To find the interquartile range, we take our two quartiles, quartile 1 and quartile 3, and we subtract those values. So 737.5 minus 169.5 gives us 568.0, or just 568, which is our IQR. So let's take our IQR of 568, multiply it by that special number 1.5. When we do that, we get 852. We want to add 852 to our third quartile and subtract it from our first quartile. When you take 169.5 and subtract 852, you're going to wind up with a negative number. And none of our data is negative. Because you can't really, 169.5, when you subtract that, you're going way left on that number line past 0. So there is no lower range here that applies. So I know 88 is not an outlier. But we need to check to see if maybe this higher number is an outlier. So let's take that 737.5 and add it to our 852. When we add that, we get 1,589.5. And 1,121 is less than that, so this is also not an outlier. So there are no outliers. Now, for letters C and D, you're going to need a lot of space, so try and write as small as you can. That's legible. The table shows a set of scores on a science test in two different classrooms. Compare and contrast their measures of variation. The first thing we need to do is find their measures of variation for each set of data. So let's go ahead and order our data from least to greatest. Let's start with room A. We have, I'm going to go ahead and type the numbers, 65, 67, 72, 78, 80, 84, 87, 92, and 100. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So that's room A. Let's go ahead and find all the information for room A, and then we'll go forward with room B. So here we have the minimum and the maximum. Minimum is 65. Maximum is 100. The median, let's find that center value, is 80. Now remember, we already crossed off 80, so we only have 4 numbers on the left, which means our quartile 1 is here. So let's find that by adding the 2 numbers and dividing by 2, which gets us 69.5. And same thing up here, we've got only 4 numbers. So our middle is here. Add 87 plus 92 and divide by 2. We get 89.5. And this is our quartile 3. Let's go ahead and do room B. And let's list our numbers. From least to greatest, we have 63, 65, 73, 79, 81, 83, 87, 93, 98. Again, there should be 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay. Our minimum is 63. Our maximum is 98. Let's find the middle, or median. Our median is 81. And let's find our first and third quartiles. Here's quartile 1, which is 65 plus 73, divide by 2, and you would get 69. And our quartile 3 is between 87 and 93, so 87 plus 93, divide by 2, and you'd get a nice 90 even. Okay, now that we have these listed out, we need our measures of variation. And our measures of variation we've got range, inner quartile range, we have our first quartile, our median, and our third quartile. And what we're going to do is we're going to find these values, or record these values, for room A and for room B. You don't have to do a table. I just find it a lot easier to organize my information. Okay. Quartile 3. Let's do everything for room A first. Our quartile 3 is 89.5. The median is 80. Quartile 1 is 69.5. To find our range and interquartile range, let's do that up here. Our range would be 100 minus 65, which is 35. This is our range. The interquartile range, we have to subtract these quartile numbers. So 89.5 minus 69.5. Subtract those and we get a nice even 20.0, or just 20, as our IQR. Okay. Now let's record everything for room B. Our third quartile is 90. Our median is 81. Our first quartile is 69. To find our range, we are going to take 98 minus 63, and we get 35 as our range. To find the interquartile range, we're going to take our third quartile minus our first quartile. When we subtract those two values, we get 21. Okay, now we have all of our measures of variation written down. The last thing to do is just compare them. So let's write a few sentences to compare them. First thing I'll say is that the range is the same for both rooms. I can also say the IQRs are close. Room B is 1 point higher than room A. And I can just generalize the rest and say there are slight differences in the medians as well as the first and third quartiles. If you look, ranges are the same. The IQRs are only 1 apart. The quartile 1s are only half a point apart. Medians are 1 point, and quartile 3 is also half a point apart. So they're pretty close. So we can just generalize that with saying there are slight differences. So this right here is your main answer. Just refreshing. Looking at the question again, it says compare and contrast the measures of variation. So we found the measures of variation, and then we compared and contrasted. Okay, one more. Again, you're going to want to write fairly small. Temperatures for the first half of the year are given for Antelope, Montana and Augusta, Maine. Compare and contrast the measures of variations of the two cities. So we need to order them from least to greatest, and actually these are already ordered from least to greatest, which makes it a little bit easier. Coincidentally, they are ordered. So let's go ahead and order them for Antelope, Montana. I'm just going to write them left and right. as opposed to up and down. Okay, so I'll just read down the list. 21, 30, 42, 58, 70, and 79. And now for Augusta, Maine. 28, 32, 41, 53, 66, and 75. Okay. Let's find our 5-number summary. Here we have our minimum and maximum. Which is 21 and 79. Our median is between 42 and 58. Add those two numbers, 42 plus 58. Divide by 2, and we get 50. Since I went in between the numbers here, I didn't go through a number on the median. That means that 58 is a part of this upper region, and the 42 is a part of the lower region. So halfway in between would be 30 as our quartile 1, and 70 as our quartile 3. To find the range, we're going to take 79 minus 21, which equals 58. To find the inner quartile range, we are going to take 70 minus 30, which equals 40. Now let's move on to Augusta, Maine. Minimum and maximum, which is 28 and 75. Our median is in between two numbers, so add 41 plus 53 and divide by 2. We get 47. Our quartile 1 is this middle number over here, which is 32. And quartile 3 is 66, which is also the middle number on the upper half. To find the range, it's 75 minus 28, which equals 47. And to find the inner quartile range, it's 66 minus 32, which equals 34. Okay. You don't have to put these into a table, but again, I would rather put them in the table. It's nice and easy to compare them when they are right next to each other. So we have our range, our inner quartile range. We have quartile 1, our median, and quartile 3. And we have this for Montana, and we have this for Maine. Okay, so for Montana, we have our range is 58, the inner quartile range is 40, Quartile 1 is 30, median is 50, and quartile 3 is 70. And for Maine, our range is 47, interquartile range is 34, quartile 1 is 32, median is 47, and quartile 3 is 66. Now let's write a couple sentences to compare them. Now all I need to do is look at this nice chart and look at them left and right. So it looks like the ranges are pretty close. However, and the interquartile ranges as well. However, because these numbers are higher for Montana, I can tell you that this data is more spread out. The numbers are more spread out than this other data. We can see our medians are pretty close, only 3 apart. Our quartile 1s and quartile 3s also aren't too far apart. So let's go ahead and jot some of that information down. So I would say the medians are close, but the temperatures are more spread out in Antelope, Maine, or Montana. And that is due to the higher range and IQR for Antelope, Maine. Let's also say that the quartile 1 is only 2 degrees higher for Montana. We can say that in quartile 3 is 4 degrees higher for Maine.